When justice fails a child, the wound doesn't stop with one family. It tears through an entire nation. In this case, it sparked 200,000 strangers to rise up and demand change. This isn't just the story of a crime. It's the story of a fight for justice that revealed how fragile safety and trust can be, even inside your own home. She was only 7 years old, a little girl with bright eyes, a beautiful smile, and dreams that stretched as far as her imagination could reach. Heaven Awat should have been safe in the place her family called home, until the very person her family trusted most shattered everything. But this tragedy didn't end with one family's grief. When justice failed this child, it ignited a wave of outrage so powerful that 200,000 strangers rose up to demand change. What happened here didn't just expose the fragility of trust, it forced a nation to confront how children are protected and how easily that protection can fail. To understand this story, we need to understand her world, Ethiopia, a nation rich in culture and history, but also a place where conflict has touched too many lives. In this environment, families often depend on each other and on the trust of their communities just to survive. For privacy, we've changed the mother's name in this story. We'll call her Abby. Abby was a nurse, someone who dedicated her life to healing others. As a single mother navigating the challenges of raising children during difficult times, she had to make hard choices about work, safety, and who to trust with her most precious possessions, her children. Like so many working mothers, Abby believed her children were safe. After all, they weren't staying with strangers. The landlord's wife was considered family. In their community, this kind of trust wasn't unusual, it was necessary. But sometimes, the greatest dangers hide in the places we least expect them to be. Sometimes, the people we trust most are the ones who cause the deepest wounds. And for this 7-year-old little girl, that trust would cost her everything. What happened to this little girl was an unthinkable betrayal. The very person her family trusted to keep her safe, someone who should have protected her, instead became her worst nightmare. The details of that day are difficult to speak about, not because we want to hide from the truth, but because some acts of violence are so senseless that they defy comprehension. What matters is this: an innocent child's life was stolen by someone who was supposed to care for her. But if the crime itself was heartbreaking, what came next was perhaps even more devastating. When the case finally reached the courtroom, when justice was supposed to prevail, the verdict left an entire nation stunned. Just 25 years in prison. 25 years. For the life of a 7-year-old girl. For Abby, for her community, for countless people across Ethiopia and beyond, it felt like justice had been denied. How do you put a price on a child's life? How do you measure the value of dreams that will never be fulfilled, laughter that will never be heard, hugs that will never be given? But the outrage didn't end there. What happened next would push a grieving mother to her breaking point and ignite a movement that reached far beyond Ethiopia's borders. The verdict didn't just anger this family. It sparked something much bigger. Within days, a petition demanding justice began circulating online. The numbers were staggering. 200,000 signatures from people who had never met this little girl but felt compelled to fight for her memory. This wasn't just social media outrage that fades in a day or two. This was sustained, purposeful action. Women's rights groups stepped forward with powerful statements that cut straight to the heart of the matter. One group said it best: the murder alone should have been enough for life imprisonment, or death. Their voices echoed what millions were feeling. The system had failed this child. Government officials found themselves forced to respond to the public outcry. The case had become more than a local tragedy. It was now a national conversation about justice, about how society protects its children, and about what happens when that protection fails. But for all the signatures, all the statements, all the official responses, there was still one person whose voice mattered most, the person who had lost everything. The mother, who would never again hear her daughter call her name. Abby's words reveal a pain that no parent should ever have to endure. "I have lost my heaven," she said. "I am lifeless. Think about those words for a moment. I am lifeless. This is what losing a child does to a parent. It doesn't just take away their future, it takes away their present, their ability to feel fully alive in a world that continues spinning while their world has completely stopped. But Abby's nightmare didn't end with her daughter's death, or even with what she saw as an inadequate sentence. She lived in constant fear. Fear that the attacker might escape custody. Fear of threats against her remaining family. Fear that forced her to move from home to home, never feeling truly safe. This is the hidden cost of violence against children. It doesn't just destroy one life. It creates ripples of trauma that touch everyone who loved that child. And perhaps most heartbreaking of all, Abby understands that her daughter's story isn't unique. In her own words, I know there are many heavens. Many children like her daughter. Many children whose stories we'll never hear. Whose families grieve in silence. Whose cases never spark international outrage or online petitions. Which brings us to the question we all need to ask ourselves. What can we learn from heaven's story? What lesson emerges from this tragedy that might help protect other children? First, we learn that trust, while necessary, must be informed. Communities need systems in place to ensure that the people caring for children are truly safe to do so. Background checks, community awareness, and open communication aren't signs of paranoia. They're signs of wisdom. Second, we see the power of collective action. 200,000 signatures didn't bring heaven back, but they proved that people care, that injustice doesn't have to be accepted quietly, and that even in our digital age, human compassion can still mobilize for good. But perhaps most importantly, heaven's story teaches us that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about prevention. It's about creating societies where children like heaven are protected before tragedy strikes, not just avenged afterward. The lesson isn't only about one crime in one country. It's about the universal need for societies to protect their most vulnerable members. Because when justice fails one child, it endangers them all. When we fail to learn from stories like heaven's, we risk creating many more just like it. Heaven A. Watt's story left an entire nation demanding change. Her mother's pain became a catalyst for conversations about justice, protection, and the value we place on children's lives. But change doesn't happen in courtrooms alone. It begins with awareness, with people like you who take the time to learn from these difficult stories and carry their lessons forward. What lesson do you take from heaven's story? How can we better protect the children in our own communities? Share your thoughts in the comments below because these conversations matter. And if you believe that every story deserves to be told with respect and purpose, subscribe for more content that finds the lessons hidden in real life. Because remembering stories like heaven's isn't just about the past, it's about building a safer future. Thank you for listening, thank you for caring, and thank you for helping ensure that heaven's story and her lesson lives on.